The Titanic. Untold stories you've never heard. On the 10th of April 1912, the Titanic set sail on its maiden voyage, a ship hailed as unsinkable, a floating palace of steel and luxury. But we all know how the story ended. An iceberg, a freezing Atlantic night, and over 1,500 souls lost in one of the greatest maritime tragedies in history. But what if I told you that beyond the familiar tale lies a treasure trove of untold stories, accounts of courage, mystery, betrayal, and fate, stories buried under the weight of history, overshadowed by Hollywood films and simplified legends. In this video, we explore the untold stories of the Titanic you've never heard. A ship of dreams and secrets. The Titanic wasn't just a ship, it was a symbol of human ambition. At 882 feet long, with opulent dining halls, Turkish baths, and even a squash court, it was a city at sea. But while the upper-class passengers dined on 10-course meals, secrets brewed in the background. Take, for instance, the ship's coal bunker fire. Few people realize that a smoldering fire was already burning in one of Titanic's coal bunkers, even before she left Southampton. Stokers had been working tirelessly to contain it, but many historians now debate, did this weaken the steel hull where the iceberg later struck? Could the tragedy have been, in part, already sealed before the ship even touched the ocean? The forgotten third class. We often hear about the luxury of first-class passengers, champagne, string quartets, and mahogany suites. But the untold story lies deep in the bowels of the ship. Third class. Over 700 immigrants were aboard, many Irish, Scandinavian, and Middle Eastern families, dreaming of a new life in America. For them, Titanic wasn't luxury, it was survival. And yet, when disaster struck, third-class passengers faced locked gates, confusing passageways, and far fewer lifeboats. Survivors later recalled how some stewards barred their way, enforcing class segregation, even as the ship sank. Out of all third-class passengers, only about a quarter survived. It wasn't just an iceberg that doomed them, it was society itself. The musicians who played to the end. One of the most haunting legends is of Titanic's band playing as the ship went down. But what's less known is the struggle behind that story. The band members were not official crew, they were subcontracted by an agency. This meant that when they died, their families received no compensation from White Star Line. In fact, bills were sent to their grieving relatives for uniforms never returned. Their final songs, was it really Nearer My God to Thee? Or was it something lighter like Ragtime to keep spirits calm? Survivors disagree. What's certain is this: the musicians gave their last breath in service to others, yet their families bore the cruelest injustices afterward. The mystery ship on the horizon. As Titanic sank, survivors in lifeboats swore they saw lights of another ship nearby. This was the SS Californian, only a few miles away. Why didn't she come? Her crew claimed they saw rockets but didn't recognize them as distress signals. Her wireless operator had gone off duty, leaving Titanic's desperate calls unanswered. But some survivors suggested something more sinister, that the Californian ignored them, fearing to risk her own safety. The mystery ship on the horizon remains one of Titanic's greatest controversies. Could hundreds more have been saved if only they came? The heroes you've never heard of. The sinking gave rise to heroes, many of whom history has forgotten. Take Charles Lightoller, the second officer. He enforced women and children first so strictly that he refused men entry into lifeboats, even if seats were empty. Yet later, he helped survivors by balancing on an overturned, collapsible boat through the freezing night. Or Margaret Brown, known later as the unsinkable Molly Brown. She was not only a wealthy socialite, but during the disaster, she rallied women to row lifeboats, clashed with crewmen who wanted to drift instead of return for survivors, and later raised funds for impoverished victims. Then there was Violet Jessop, a stewardess and nurse, who survived not only Titanic, but also its sister ships, Olympic and Britannic, both of which met disaster. A true unsinkable woman. The conspiracies and theories. No great tragedy is without its conspiracies. Some claim the Titanic was switched with her nearly identical sister ship, Olympic, as part of an insurance scam gone wrong. Others whisper about premonitions, like the 1898 novel Futility, which eerily predicted the sinking of an unsinkable ship named Titan. And then there's J.P. Morgan, the powerful financier behind White Star Line, who cancelled his voyage last minute. Did he know something, or was it merely coincidence? Though most theories remain unproven, they add to the enduring mystique of the Titanic, a ship that refuses to rest in peace, even in the icy depths. Survivors' haunted lives. Surviving Titanic didn't mean escaping tragedy, it often meant living with ghosts. Take Isidore and Ida Strauss. Ida refused to board a lifeboat without her husband, saying, "We have lived together and we shall die together." Survivors remembered them arm in arm as the waters rose. Their family lived with that story forever. Some survivors, like Jack Thayer, struggled with lifelong trauma, eventually taking his own life decades later. Others faced ridicule. Male survivors especially criticized for living, while women and children perished. The iceberg claimed lives that night, but Titanic haunted souls for generations. Titanic at the bottom of the sea. When Robert Ballard finally discovered Titanic's wreck in 1985, it revealed a time capsule preserved for 73 years. Shoes still on the seabed, plates stacked neatly, a ship split in two, lying silently in eternal darkness. But even here, controversies remain. Should artifacts be recovered, or should Titanic remain a grave? Expeditions continue to this day, with the wreck deteriorating rapidly, eaten by iron-eating bacteria. Within decades, Titanic may vanish completely, leaving only the stories behind. Lessons from Titanic. The Titanic wasn't just a maritime tragedy, it was a mirror of society. Class inequality, blind faith in technology, and corporate greed all played roles. The disaster forced reforms, enough lifeboats for all, round-the-clock radio watch and international ice patrols. But perhaps the greatest lesson lies in humility. The reminder that human pride can sink, and that no ship, no matter how grand, is unsinkable. The Titanic's end was not a single moment of catastrophe, but a series of small tragedies that built toward the inevitable. The unnoticed coal fire smoldering in her bunkers before she even left port. A flaw ignored because the maiden voyage could not be delayed. The locked gates and confusing passageways that trapped third-class families in the belly of the ship, showing that class divisions can be as deadly as ice. The Californian, a ship visible on the horizon that never came, its radio operator asleep, its officers misreading the rockets as signals of festivity rather than distress. The 8 musicians who played to calm the panic and gave their last notes as an offering of hope, only for their grieving families to later receive bills for uniforms never returned. The voices of survivors who would forever remember the moment when Titanic's lights flickered and vanished, leaving only an unbearable silence, broken by the screams of hundreds in the freezing dark. The survivors carried their ghosts for decades. Children who never saw their parents again, husbands accused of cowardice for escaping while others drowned, young men like Jack Thayer who lived but never truly escaped that night, his life ending in despair years later. Families waited on New York's piers for loved ones who never appeared, their grief swallowed by the fog of headlines and inquiries that sought blame but rarely offered comfort. Within decades, Titanic will vanish entirely, leaving behind only stories, and it is in those stories that she truly lives. Titanic endures because she is not only about maritime history, but about the fragility of human ambition, about the arrogance of calling something unsinkable, about the cruelty of dividing lives by class and wealth, but also about the resilience of love, loyalty, and sacrifice when all else fails. We return to her tale again and again, not simply to marvel at the tragedy, but to ask ourselves, in that moment, had we been there, what would we have done? Would we have offered our seat in a lifeboat or clung to survival at any cost? Would we have sung into the night with courage or hidden in fear? Titanic forces us to look into a mirror, to confront not only history but ourselves. And so, as we close her story once more, we must remember that Titanic is not just a shipwreck rusting on the ocean floor. She is the echo of coal fires left unattended, The clang of gates locking against desperate hands, the trembling of violin strings in the cold night, the light of rockets unheeded on the horizon, the clasp of two hands refusing to part even as the sea swallowed them. Titanic is the story of dreams and arrogance, of death and survival, of loss and love, of humanity at its most fragile and its most noble. The steel may fade, the wreck may collapse into the sand, but the Titanic's untold stories will never truly sink, for they live on in us as lessons, as warnings, and as reminders of what it means to be human in the face of the unimaginable. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into history's greatest mysteries.